move on to the second part of this deal. We slide, Clyde?
Okay.
What do you guys think about that? This is the pre-interview protocol. This is something that was developed in my kitchen. So, okay, now we have a scorecard, we have a job description, we're ready to go. This is kind of the checklist before we start interviewing people. Hiring manager is the responsible party. He's the guy that's going to ask, hey, will you help me in this interview process? If it's with CSRs, it might already be known because you do it all the time or something like that. You might have your hiring committee or whatever. If it's something like, a payroll clerk or something like that, that we don't hire very often, we might have to kind of say like, well, who'd be good on this, Most of the time it's pretty self-apparent. People that are going to be managing the person, people that work closely with, with that position, those sorts of things. But the hiring manager is going to be responsible for kind of picking his crew or her crew, and is also going to be responsible for kind of delegating what they're going to be responsible for. Okay, I'd like you to do the first interview process, or the first interview, which is going to be a lot of background stuff. It's going to be a couple of key competencies that I want you to ask some behavioral questions on, and here's what they are. He's also going to provide them with interview guides. We'll get into that a little bit later. I want us all to kind of start using some sort of interview guide when we do these interviews. And it's going to vary on job, it's going to vary in department, it's going to vary in position. The hiring manager should also make sure that this is done before the hiring starts, in earnest, so that we know who's responsible for what, where our knockout areas are, when our knockout things are. We're going to have the number of interviews defined. Maybe it's 2, maybe it's a group interview and 1 interview, maybe it's a group interview and 2 other interviews, maybe it's 4 interviews if it's an important position, and all those things. Okay? Next slide. Now, let's take a little detour and talk about all the stuff we can't ask. We can't ask questions based on age, race or ethnicity, gender, sex, sexual orientation, marital status, how many kids they have, or if they're pregnant, or they plan on getting pregnant. Do you plan on having any kids? Can't talk about asking their religion, their place where they were born, if you think they were born in a different country, or even if it was here. That's the other thing people forget about. Like, you could ask the question like, you were born here, right? Or you were born here? You can't ask that. Are you from the United States? You can't ask that. You can't ask them if they've got a disability. You can't ask them how tall they are or how much they weigh. Thank goodness.
Can you ask them a question like, well, tell me about yourself, just talk to me, and then they just...
Sure, we'll go through it. We'll go through, and you can ask other questions that solicit stuff that you may want to know about this. Yeah. You can't ask their home location either, like where they, and I didn't know this till I kind of was going through this. Like, you can't ask them where they live.
It's already on the application.
It's on the application.
They're giving that up, and we need a place to as a contact. So they're telling you that. However, that might, in the case of some people that apply here, That's just a place where they get their mail. You know, so, but there's other things we can ask.
We have a question, when we're hiring CSRs, we don't ask how old they are, but we ask, are you at least 23 years of age?
Yeah,
Just for insurance purposes, they don't have to tell us how old they are, but if they say, yes, I'm at least 23, then we're okay with that.
we'll kind of go through there are some times where you can actually ask them to verify whether they are or are not, because it's a bona fide job qualification. In other words, you have to be 23 to be insured, you know, is that an issue? That's exactly how I'd ask it. And that we can ask. Because it's, you know, it's a requirement. There's some other things too, aren't there? Age things.
You mean like other requirements of jobs?
Yeah, you know, I mean for us specifically.
I think 18 years and up is the only other one. Besides
Yeah,
the
so
drivers.
if somebody applied here and they were 17, you know, we could say, you know, no, we don't. Okay, next slide, we're gonna go through some of this stuff now. Good thing to kind of go through before you start interviewing. So in the middle column are questions that are valid reasons as to why you could ask them or how you could ask them. And on the far right is definitely what you can't ask them for. So if you're asking questions about their name that are, you can't say like, oh, Kerkorian, that sounds Armenian. You can't, is that Armenian? You can't say that, you know? But you could say, we do background checks. And so, have you used any other name? Or you have any other aliases that your background might be under? That you can ask. But anything that's like, hey, Miyaki, that sounds Polish. Do you have people from Poland, you know, that you know? No. I mean, you can't say stuff like that. Oh, that's a Hispanic name. Good, you'll get along with all of the people here. Right? Any questions? Kind of right along with that, the national origin, citizenship. You know, we can't ask if they were, you know, a naturalized citizen here, or if they were native born. By merit of them applying for a job and going through the E-Verify thing, I mean, it's implied that they're a citizen or they have the right to work here. But you can't, you can ask them for that proof in the E-Verify process, but when they come through the door, you can't card them, basically, or ask for their passport or anything like that. So this states the languages, you know, hey, you're from Mexico, you must know how to speak Spanish, right? Or you speak Spanish, you must be from Mexico or Spain or wherever. You can't ask those sorts of questions. Portuguese, well then you must be from Brazil then, right? Age, again, any question that is going to appear that you're aging them out, or you can't say something like, well, we don't hire anybody over 30 to do route work here. You can't say that. You can ask their date of birth, though, and so you should probably pretty well be able to figure out, you know, how old they are. That's on the application too. I'm just waiting for them to like take all of the things on the application off, make them all illegal. We're just gonna have. we're just gonna have like blind hiring. Or it's just gonna be like a roulette hiring. Again, on the age thing, if we have any requirement by law, like if you're in a bar or something like that, you know, to serve alcohol, they might have to be a certain age, or to be in a place that does that, depending on the state, might have to be. In our case, you know, we have insurance requirements if they're going to be driving company vehicles. You know, it seems like there's something I'm missing as far as age, but I can't think of it right now. Anybody got any questions?
I don't know about age, but we do have a question on the CSR questionnaire that says, what languages do you speak, and can you read and write in both languages?
Oh, like bilingual.
That's exactly what it says. What languages do you speak, and can you read and write in both languages? Or can you read and write?
In both?
Well,
That
can
kind
you
of
read and
thing.
write in
In all
that
my
language?
languages that you speak.
Under B, it says you can ask it.
You can ask that in that way.
It has to be in that way.
Yeah.
What language do you speak?
If it says both, if it doesn't say.
No, it doesn't say
do you-
both, it just says, can you read and write in that language?
Yeah.
In the languages that you speak.
And again, that we could, if anybody wanted to protest that, you know, oh, you know, you're just trying to ferret out non-English speakers or writers. Well, yeah, because in most of these jobs, you do have to be able to write to a certain degree in English. You have to be able to read paperwork, read written directions and things like that. So that is a job requirement. Where it gets dicey is where they say, well, can you make reasonable accommodations? That's the slippery slope. But the way that we have it written,
Yeah.
as long as it doesn't say both, as long as it say English and,
But
or
we're asking what they, obviously.
Yeah, the first
There
part
you
is
go.
what language do
Get
you
that.
speak? What languages do you speak? And they usually say English and Spanish, or just English or whatever. And then we ask, can you read and write in that language?
there you go.
Can you just, outright just say, are you bilingual by any chance? Because it's a benefit to us if they are.
You're asking that.
Well, you ask.
I know, but you
Yeah,
just
you
say, are you bilingual?
Yeah, I know French and
I would ask it more like what, if you speak any other languages?
Right, okay.
Boom.
trilingual.
Yeah, it might be
Try.
quadlingual, hexalingual. Marital, parental, or family status, you know, you look like an only child. You act like an only child, are you? No, you obviously can't ask, are you married? Married? Divorced? That sort of thing. You know, I've heard people say, like, you know, if you're talking to somebody and you're not sure if they're married, because sometimes you can't tell, and that's not on the job application, and nor it should be, but you can ask, you know, are there any other people that you need to consult with that are going to be involved in this decision making? And that's even kind of a slippery question.
You can't just say, you gotta roll this past your wife first.
You can't say that.
Who wears the pants in your family?
Yeah. I'm assuming you just tell your wife does whatever you tell her to, so, you know. But you gotta be very careful about that. I think you've got to be, this also, I remember back in the day, people would say, like, yeah, we don't really hire women for this position because they just tend to get pregnant. And then they're gone for, you know, a year. You know, so it's not working out for us. You remember that?
Yeah, that was on every question in every interview process in the 70s and 80s.
So you can't ask questions about their family planning. Oh, even if they tell you like, yeah, I have 2 kids, oh, do you plan on having more kids? No, can't ask that question. You might say like, I had a hysterectomy. No, so everybody got that, can't do that? I'm like, wow, oh, you're pregnant, you know? Don't do that either.
I did that one time.
Might be
You
wrong.
did?
I did it one time and she wasn't pregnant.
Education, I don't know so much about this. What's this one say?
Are we moving on from this slide?
Oh, yeah, we are,
Next
sorry. Gotta keep up. It's a dynamic class. Inquiry into the nature and extent of active, okay, this gets at education. I think there's a lot of leeway with this, but if you're going like, did you go to any madrasas? Did you study in any madrasas? Or did you go to Jewish school? Or that sort of thing? Or did you go to Catholic school? Or whatever. You can't ask those things specifically to try to discern a religious orientation, or, you know, there are some that are, you know, like religious or other religious oriented schools. You can't do that. And I guess they're saying, oh, while you went to school, where you went to school, like, you know, what was the language that was taught in. Work schedule as it relates to religious holidays. So, you know, you can't say things like, "Hey, we work on all Jewish holidays. Is that okay with you?" Or you can't say, you know, we work on Ramadan. We work all the way through Ramadan. You don't have any problem with that, right? In our case, you could say like, we work every fucking holiday, so
We do.
so we're an equal opportunity giver as far as that goes. So we usually won't run into any of those problems, but you can ask about their, you know, we work. The schedule is unknown. Do you have any requirements that I need to know about, you know, pertaining to your work schedule? Doesn't mean they can't say no, and then later on say, you know, I'm a Buddhist and I need these days off and stuff like that. The religion one goes without saying. You can't. This one specifically talks about Catholic Marianist institution. It's because like I said, I ripped this off a website of a Catholic school. You can't ask them, obviously, what their religion is. You can't even ask, can't even probe around it. You can't even say things like, hey, this is a Christian-oriented organization. Do you have a problem with that? You can't say that. You can't say most of the people around here are Catholic or Christian or whatever. Do you have an issue with that? It doesn't fly. Next slide. Organizations, affiliations. If you're getting at like, hey, do you belong to the Knights of Columbus, which for those of you who don't know is a Catholic organization, to try to get to, you know, hey, do you belong to the Ku Klux Klan? You know, to try to get to, or the NAACP or whatever. Like, you know, you can't ask questions that where it's, you know, it's a predominantly ethnic or religious group. Personal, physical, being a certain height or weight will not be considered to be a job requirement unless the employer can show that no employee with the intelligible height or weight could do the work. So I think it's reasonable for us to say, what's the CSR weight limit? What's our deal?
I don't think it's the weight, it's if their stomach is the.
We need balance.
We ask them, like, we our CSRs are required to walk up to 2 miles a day, lift 50 pounds at a time.
50 pounds.
And the question is, are
Meet
you
these
able
physical
to meet the physical
requirements.
requirement?
Yeah.
Yeah, and those are all reasonable, you know, I would probably add, can you get in and out of a truck that's, you know, 4 feet?
4 feet off.
4 feet off the ground, how many times a day? 50?
Yeah.
You know, can you do that at least 50 times a day, you know? I'd say 100. Anyway, those are bona fide job requirements. Disabilities. You know, again, there's that reasonable accommodation thing. So if you have someone that applies for a job that obviously has a disability, we need to be cognizant of that. Doesn't mean that we have to be able to hire them. Certain jobs, you know, there might be a medical condition where they can't drive the truck, or if they're in a wheelchair, they can't. It's not reasonable to have us bear the expense of getting a truck that a wheelchair guy could do, and he can't get in and out of the truck. That's not reasonable. But it's certainly nothing that we have to say or even talk about in an interview. Has anybody ever hired anybody with a severe disability?
Blue light, Charlie.
I think the worst we've ever had here is just people missing a few fingers. That's about it.
You get extra points for that.
Yeah.
Hired me, I have a mental disability.
We hired Robert.
Yeah, that was.
But you can't ask about, obviously, ask about any disability. You can't ask about any illness. You can't ask about, like, you know, any major surgeries that you might have coming up, anything like that. Next slide. You shouldn't ask if you haven't been arrested, but we can find stuff out. We can find stuff out on a background check. You can just say that, like I think you have it on your interview question. We do background checks. Is there anything you want to get out of the way before we find out through background? You know, you want to explain anything? But you can't say, like, you know, have you ever? I think the applications used to say if you've ever been convicted of a felony. Do they still?
The application doesn't, but there's a questionnaire behind it that asks.
I don't think that's illegal, but I might be wrong. Things are changing all the time. I don't think it's illegal, but it still isn't something I would ask. But, you know, I think we can get everything that we need from the question I just said. And from the question that's on the CSR interview guy.
Plus, we'd beat that one all day in a court of law.
Yeah. Well, then would be held against us and say, like, well, you know, you hire all these other guys, but then you didn't hire him. How come you didn't? How come you treated him unfairly?
We were full.
You're just full. Military service, even though this sounds like it might be, this was interesting, even though it sounds like it might be, you know, a plus, I guess you can't ask about discharge stuff. I didn't know that. You can't ask them for military records. Not that you get them, probably. Or armed services, in another country, from another country. If they list it as part of their job qualification or in their job history or what they were doing, you can ask about that in regards to how it's going to relate to the job that you're hiring for. And I guess after they're hired, then you can get a military discharge certificate. So that's confusing. Like, you know, if they were dishonorably discharged, you couldn't find out until after the fact, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But again, just like the background checks, you could do the same thing. You could say, you know, we're gonna ask for a discharge certificate, anything I need to know. And we talked about references already. Don't ask for references from their priest or, you know, their political party president or anything that is going to skew things one way or the other, as far as that stuff goes. Past employers, personal references are fine, you know, but just keep it generic as far as that goes. If they've listed a past employer or they've listed a reference, that's fine to talk about. But you can't ask for, can you get me your pastor's reference? Any questions? The rule of thumb is, you know, if you don't know, don't ask it. If you don't know, don't ask it. And, you know, we can, if there's a bona fide reason that you need to know something and it feels like a question you shouldn't ask, let's talk about it. Let's get a ruling from our HR attorneys and see if we really need to ask it, if there's a different way of finding out, or, you know, there's some workaround. Diggs? Okay. Slide. Keys to being a successful interviewer. So, we're about ready to start the interview process. You're in charge. The most important thing is that we have a plan. You've got your diagram because you did it before you started interviewing, and you know who's going to be involved, and you're ready to start doing your part of the interviewing. So, I like to think about interviewing as a conversation with your kids about something that you want to find out that's fucked up in the house. So if you take that mindset, like, that's probably a good one. You want to position your questions, and you want to work with a detective-like manner in trying to get these things done. We're gonna border maybe on some manipulation in an interview, and I'm okay with that because it's not illegal, and it's not really manipulation. Everybody's got free will in this interview, so we'll be all right. But you gotta have a plan. You got to be a good detective, and we've got to focus on the facts. So questions that, you know, are like, you know, tell me about, you know, how you think a laundry facility should be managed. Really are got no place. They're a waste of time. And because it's not focusing on facts about how things are done. Next slide. This is the axiom. Our best predictor of future performance is past behavior. Footprints in the sand. So, you know, you're going to tell how they're most likely to perform in the future by how they did in the past. If they've ran through 5 jobs in the last 4 years and there's a lot of discrepancies as to like where they were, they don't have a lot of references. References they do have are sketchy and they don't check out. Interviews and there's holes in stories, or you can't come up with the examples that you need to come up with. It's probably a bad sign. And so it's time to cut bait. But if we just let people tell us, theoretically, how things should be, or how they would do things, or what things should be like, they're gonna tell you whatever they wanna tell you. And you've got no way to verify whether that's true or not. Believing is one thing and doing is another. Next slide. So, how do we discover past behavior patterns? Well, the first thing we do is get them in a room. And we gotta kind of get them comfortable. We gotta build trust. This is what cops do in interviewing, and when they're interviewing people too. The good cop, bad cop thing. The good cop is going to build the trust, and he's the guy that the perp needs to trust to protect him from the bad cop, and that's what it's all about. We're not going to go quite that far, but we need to make them feel that they're comfortable with us, that we're competent, and that we're not looming over them. Why? Because it's not going to produce good results anyway. Even if they're a great candidate, they're going to be on edge and things like that. We need to be able to separate fact from bullshit or fiction. Big part of the process is getting the candidate to interview the way that you want them to interview. I've had people just go off, and you had to keep bringing them back. You've got to maintain focus. It's not unusual to have to maintain focus on your questions from time to time, but if it's constant, that's probably bad. They're repelling what you want to know. They're repelling real shit and wanting to go off into theoretical answers. And the reason they're doing that is because they don't have any good specific answers to give you. They're gonna kind of keep doing that. If you have to keep corralling them back all the time, and we'll go through this, if you have to keep corralling them back all the time, that's not a good sign. So you got to maintain focus and ask good discovery questions, which you will because you've already planned them with your interview guide. But sometimes there's good follow-up questions or good clarifying questions. Just remember, I get too consumed with clarifying stuff that probably doesn't really matter. And so that's kind of a problem of mine, and that can take a long time. But when we get into these behavioral things, I want these clarifying questions because it gets at the detail, which if the detail is not there, then there's a good chance what they're telling me is just a story. And again, we're trying to separate fact from fiction. Okay? Next slide. So, trust. Creating the environment of discovery. We gotta set the right environment. And by that, I mean, we have pretty good places to interview here, but if you're interviewing like out in the open, or if it's uncomfortable, or you're sitting higher than they are, or anything like that, that's not good. A nice quiet place where it's just you and the candidate, and you get to be able to just spend some quality time together. Take the time to build rapport. So, you like hunting? I like hunting too. Where do you hunt? I hunt here. That's that sort of stuff. You live in a house? I live in a house too. Wow. You're from Ohio? I'm from Ohio too. Well, what high school did you go to? Well, who'd you play with? So, kind of take time to make the small talk, because that's just kind of the icebreaker. Position the interview as a discussion. Just say like, hey, I'm glad you came in. Look, want to take some time to talk to you. I know you've talked to a couple other people, and you've probably talked to a couple people after me, but that's all this is. We're just talking because you want to know about us, and we want to know about you. It's a discussion, so it's a two-way street. Okay. So that I found one thing that people really want to know, and they don't really know. They don't know where they're at in the process, and it really helps them feel comfortable if they know. And it's fine if it gets reiterated because you have this. So if it should be told to them every time they're talked to. So let's say we're doing a phone screen. Hey, blah 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 blah. Here's, if you get to the point of the phone screen where you know you're going to move this person along, I'll tell them, like, here's the process. You're going to come in, you're going to go through an interview with so and so, and then at that time, you may decide this isn't for you. We may decide that too, and then it's decided from there on. But what I tell them is, as I say, hey, this is at the outset, this is a long process. If it's 3 interviews, it's a long process because they've been phone screened and they're going to talk to 3 different people before a decision is even made. So I tell them what's going to go on the meeting. I'm just going to say, hey, here's the deal. I want to just verify a few things about you. Let's say I'm in the second interview. I want to verify a few things about you that I know I can see from your resume and application. Then I'm going to ask you some questions related to the job. Then you can ask me any questions you want. You can ask me about me, you can ask me about the company, you can ask me anything you want to. And then we'll decide where to go from there. Sound good? Good. And I'll say, I don't know if anybody's told you this, but you got a phone screen, you went through a first interview, I'm doing the second interview. If we both decide that we want to move this process along, there'll be another interview, and then there'll be a hiring decision after that. So I usually try to give them a time frame too. So depending on what happens here today, the next interview probably wouldn't be for X amount of days, and it'll probably be X amount of days after that. So at the earliest, a hiring decision would be made here. At the latest, a hiring decision would be made here. Is that time frame okay with you? So once they understand where they're at, they feel a lot more comfortable about what's going on. They also know how long to wait. I mean, if they're waiting, if they're interviewing in other scenarios and stuff like that, they don't know. You might be interviewing them forever. So they at least know where they're at in the process. Listen, so you don't have to really talk that much in the interview. They should be doing probably 80% of the talking. If you're asking the right questions, they should be answering in terms of where they're talking 80% of the time. Can you handle the pressure? Yes. You talked 80% more than I did in that question. So now there could be a follow-up question, but the behavioral questions will get you there. Maintain the candidate's self-esteem. This is kind of a fancy way of saying soften them up. Again, making them feel comfortable. You don't want to push them, in this type of interview, we don't want to push them on their heels. This is not some sort of psychological interview, or I'm going to ask you where you got your shoes, or any that kind of stuff, or it's not a mind game or anything like that. We want them to feel like we like them. We want them to feel good about being there, because the more they feel good, the more that they like you, the more they're going to tell you, and the more candid they're going to be. Okay? So how do we maintain their self-esteem? We empathize with them. Oh, wow. Geez. You...
Or socks, so do I.
Huh?
You wear socks, so do I.
Well, yeah, but there could be some, he could have mentioned like, yeah, I've got 3 girls or something like that, or I got 2 girls. Wow, you do? I got 3 girls too. How do you like raising girls? Is that a challenge? I really know what you're going through. Anything that you can find to connect, to kind of be in common with them is good stuff. Identify with them. Hey, you're from Ohio, I'm from Ohio. We're buds. You drive a Ford F-150 just like I do. You must be cool. So anything you can do to do that. Oh, I see you're a Cardinal fan. You have Cardinal license plates. How do you think they're going to do that this year? Anything you can do to kind of identify with what their likes or their habits are good. Even if you don't necessarily agree with it, you can be a little fake and compliment them on their answers. Yeah, I went to school and I paid for, or I went to school at Oregon State University and I studied chemistry. Wow, you studied chemistry there? That must have been hard. Anything that you can do with those sorts of answers, that kind of pumps them up a little bit. Don't make the candidate off-put by your demeanor. So like if you're giving bad body language, you're turning sideways, you're folding your arms, or you're kind of sitting back in your chair. You don't want to do that. You kind of want to be up in their eyes and engaged and kind of like almost awestruck that they are actually here in front of you interviewing. Because the more that you do that, the more you're going to get out of them. They're going to feel good about it. At this point, they're thinking they're going to get hired, and that's fine, because that's where you want. That's what you want them to feel like. Because the more they feel like that, the more they're going to tell you, like, "Hey, I'm doing great. I'm killing this motherfucker." I'm just going to say all kinds of shit. Wow, you drank 32 beers? And then while you were on lunch? Wow, that's awesome. Show the candidate you're on his side. Yeah, hey, I'm rooting for you, man. That's cool. You need a break. Everybody needs a break, right? Yeah, let's do it. Slide. What are some ways we can communicate as interviews to help the candidate's self-esteem? Okay, I gave you some. You guys tell me some.
Say they describe a situation where they used tenacity in their previous position, and you could say, wow, it's really fantastic that you went that extra mile in order to accomplish that job, even though you came across this obstacle and that obstacle and everything else.
Right.
I had a guy I was interviewing, I asked him if he had reliable transportation, that's one of our questions, and he said, yeah, I have a Mustang, and I was like, oh, I'm a Mustang guy, I've had 3 of them, and we kind of spent a couple minutes talking about Mustangs. So. Good.
I use the hunting and archery thing, some of mine, and on some candidates actually.
Yeah, that would work. Guns. I don't know. Is it illegal to talk about guns yet?
Not yet.
What else?
I think in our industry, restaurants, if they've been to certain restaurants, say, oh, hey, you know what? We service at a restaurant.
That's good. That's good. Girls always talk about clothes.
No, if they have kids, girls always talk about their kids, so we don't even have to ask, because we're all proud, like, oh, I've got 2 babies. Wow, that's great that you're able to, you have 2 kids and you work full-time, that's amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing. How do you do it?
Are you worried because you want to get away from your kids? Is that what's happening?
What else?
Can't miss that.
Oops.
Can't miss that.
Is that illegal?
All right, let's go. We're gonna do a little exercise in here. We're gonna do both sides of this. We're gonna, this could be a written exercise, but we're not gonna do it. We're just gonna shout some shit out. So these are all statements. The C is for candidates. The P is for, I want you guys to give me a statement of what preserves their self-esteem, and what the NP is non-preserving of their self-esteem. So we're gonna
Jeff method.
yeah, so we're gonna say both. So the first question, Eric, if you can't see, is my boss fired me without warning even though my performance was good. So if you were gonna say something preserving about that, what would you say?
Oh man, that's messed up. Well, I'm sorry to
That's
hear
unfortunate.
That doesn't.
You have a boss that didn't understand you. And decided to fire
Yeah,
you.
that doesn't sound fair. Boss didn't understand you. What's non-self-esteem preserving?
Sure,
Flyers.
What the fuck did you do? Okay, whenever I start a new job, it's confusing to me, but eventually I'll get it.
I think that's common for me.
We hire a lot of slow starters.
That's our specialty.
We put the special.
That was an MP.
You'll get it, I'll help you along.
That's good, I like that,
We have a
yeah.
great training program. I'm sure you'll find it useful eventually.
What's a non-preserving one? You're screwed. Anyone?
We're not running a kindergarten class.
Could be.
What's this?
Could be like, why, why are you so disorganized?
Where's it? Bob's?
Is there a problem with that? I have to leave Bob's Big Boy at,
Should work at Christian.
what, S, no, you put a period in there. That's a typo.
No, it's a comma.
No, and Bob's, oh, yeah, it is a sentence. I have to leave Bob's Big Boy, period. At $1,600 a month, I can't support myself and 8 kids. What preserves that?
Stuff out there about it.
Huh?
God, you got laid 8 times?
That's amazing.
I still have time to work.
What? What
Never
else?
heard of condom?
Well, here we always have room for growth, so. You'll eventually get that.
Or you can say,
We can hire your kids.
come on, you guys give me one.
Well, a
This
Big Boy's
side.
about the greatest sandwich in the world, so at least you had that going for you while you were there.
Yeah.
That's a P. I love Bob's Big Boy.
A legitimate one. Over here. Just
Can you give me a discount on the
Give me
target?
one.
Kind of at the end piece. Oh, let me help you find the local welfare office. I mean, I don't think they're.
That would be tough. I came from a big family as well. We might be able to help you.
Yeah, man, that's tough. It's, it's a testament to your, to your drive that, you're out there making it happen for your kids. And it's a testament that you're trying to improve your situation. That's pretty fucking good, actually. Yeah, the MPs, I think you guys got down. The past 24 months, I've been one of the top 10 salespeople in the company.
You're just the guy we're looking for.
That must be hard
That's
to do.
amazing.
Why are you looking for
Those are some awesome numbers, I'm imagining.
Exactly.
Yaki.
Sometimes it feels hopeless in my current job because my boss expects me to do everything.
You can only do so much.
Wow, it's great that they trust you that much to put all that pressure on you.
Good job.
That was a good one right there.
Shit.
What's a non-preserving one?
My boss was a dick too.
That's preserving, actually. Right?
Yeah, it was borderline.
Building trust.
Yeah. I didn't like my inspection My inspection at Johnny's Cheese Curds, it was too boring. Job, I think it's job.
It was supposed to be job.
Inspection job.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that job either.
I also have cheese curds.
What's non-preserving?
Good for you.
What?
Good for you.
Well, you're not gonna like this job either.
No.
Sounds like a piece of cake.
The only thing that keeps me from work is my kids being sick or one of their other school functions.
It's tough raising kids today and working a full-time job.
Not your job as a woman, so it's okay. You should take the time off.
Well, family does come first.
What's a non-preserving one?
Not my problem.
Never thought of it all.
Yeah, I could see us maybe
Maybe you should.
not being, not being really good with that one. It's not important for us to voice our opinions at this point. In fact, there are some things we'll talk about that we're gonna solicit negative feedback. We're gonna solicit it. And we're gonna actually imply that it's okay. Something that we want, we're gonna imply that it's okay to not have, And we're gonna leave it up to them to tell us, well, no, I show up for work all the time, anyway, so it doesn't matter. Is anybody gonna have problems with this?
Yep.
It's hard to bite your
Not
tongue.
a good tea guy.
Just remember, it's rope-a-dope. I mean, everybody familiar with rope-a-dope? Muhammad Ali,
Yeah.
you're kind of duping your opponent into thinking that you're stupid, far off, whatever. So it takes, you got to go into it kind of thinking about that, kind of like, I'm just trying to set the table to get the best information out of this I can. I want to offend this guy. I want to identify with him. I want him to feel warm and fuzzy. I want him to feel like I'm putting my arm around him, saying like, "Hey, yeah, just tell me everything," right? Okay. All right. What's next? Fact-finding, separate actual behavior from perceptions. Behavior, for our purposes here in interviewing, is defined as an action or reaction in a specific situation. That's another typo. With a known result. So, in other words, something happened and there was a result that we know about. It has nothing to do with what a candidate thinks something should be, what should have happened, what was the fair thing to do, the way I believe that things are, or how I would do things, And listen for that word. I would do this. Anytime you hear that, it doesn't count. What you want are statements of fact about a situation that actually happened. Behavior is what actually happened, okay? Next slide. So, types of interview questions. General or background informational questions. Give me some of those.
Can you lift 60 pounds and walk 20 miles a day?
Yeah.
Do you have a valid driver's license?
Yep.
You have a problem working in the heat?
Yep. What else? Something that's gonna
Must have.
something that's gonna be more than just yes or no.
How many times have you called off in the past year at your last employer?
No, that's more of a behavioral thing. General background, tell me about when you worked at Mission. These are questions that are probably gonna be mostly in the screening and first interview stuff. Not a lot in the second and third or fourth interviews.
What else you like about that particular job?
Okay, if you wanted to know, likes and dislikes, I would put them in that category. It doesn't really, it doesn't tell me, it tells me what he likes, what he doesn't like, or what she likes, doesn't like. It doesn't tell me necessarily about behavior, but, okay, I like the heat, I don't like the heat. You know, I like driving a truck, I don't like driving, you know, whatever. This is where I want to find out more probably about them personally. So if they've opened the door up to their family, you can ask questions then about it. They've already told you that they're married and they have a couple of kids. Now it's open. What do you do? What do you do with your family? You know? Well, we go to church on Sundays. Bingo. Okay, he's maybe got a Sunday problem. Maybe not. Maybe he's flexible. Maybe he's not. But I'm writing that down. I don't know how I'm going to ask that later on, but whatever.
Do you have any hobbies?
Or you work weekends, holidays?
Getting more into, this is not background, it's getting a little, maybe a little bit, but I'm trying to find out about the person. You know, tell me about your time in Albuquerque, tell me, you know, about driving truck for Viking or whatever. You know, how are the bosses there or whatever. It's still kind of, it also is kind of blended in with rapport building, but you're also getting some information. In this period is where you want to kind of line up your chronological gaps. So from November of 2010, you know, to September of 2012, I don't see anything listed about where you worked, what was going on then.
Wouldn't that start to be clarifying?
Well, possibly, but I mean, you haven't even asked the question. He's just told you on paper, I guess. So you might have a good reason for that. Oh yeah, I was in the hospital. I guess you could call it clarifying. Clarifying is more like when they've told you something and you need clarification on something that he told you.
It's from him.
Yeah, and usually I spend too much time on this too but I want to kind of understand what's going on. Like, you know, they might have had a job where they worked in 2 different states and they drove truck here and then they went back, they went here and then they went back to this job. You don't know, well, was that before you left or when you went back or whatever, you know? I kind of want to know that sort of thing. So that's clarifying questions. Background is anything that they've opened the door up to personally, their past job, maybe their past education, maybe their past geography, you know, where they lived, hobbies,
Your
interests outside, all those things that are kind of maybe going to create some issues for you later on. I'd be listening for that. I'd also start listening for stability at this point too. Stability, you know, in their personal life. So they move around a whole bunch. If they did move around, maybe they moved around for a reason. Maybe their spouse was in the military or something like that. But they just bounce around just because, that's kind of weird. Or it's a red flag, you know. If, you know, if it sounds like there's a lot of family activity all the time, that's probably stable. You know, just start listening for stuff like that. Doesn't mean that it's true, you know? It just means that, you know, you said it. Clarifying questions, like I said, it's more kind of like, they've told you something, now I want to go back and say like, well, wait a minute. You were doing this when you were doing that? Oh yeah, I worked 2 jobs at the same time, or I went back and forth, and that sort of thing. Theoretical question, what's a theoretical question? We've had a few of them in here today.
Scenarios,
Huh?
scenarios,
So like what?
providing examples.
Huh?
What would you do?
Yeah, so give me an example.
Well, even Brian's question, just what would you do in this situation? No, I thought that was a good one. When, you know, you come across an issue with a product or something, you've went to your manager, what would you do or what would you have done differently?
Yeah, and sometimes they're just a good kind of segue in. I mean, it's not like we should never ask them, but they're not good to spend a bunch of time on, because the guy's just gonna pontificate.
How do you handle stressful situations?
I probably wouldn't ask that. He's just gonna give me bullshit, probably. A good theoretical question is like, is to say like, what are your feelings about unions? It doesn't necessarily say, have you ever been in a union, or, you know, or anything like that. But it's a theoretical question that kind of gets to his underlying beliefs about union activity. And that's a question that's okay to ask. And it's a good theoretical one. Because really, the union mentality, whether you're for or against it, is a belief system more than anything. So that's a good one.
Could also be maybe the willingness to travel or relocate.
Yeah, I would say yeah. Right now, it's theoretical. It's a theoretical question because I don't even know. But yeah.
So does it pertain to the job? So for instance, a situation of how would you handle it if you didn't have all the right tools for your job in the morning to start, things like that?
We're talking about theoretical questions now. You're getting more into behavioral stuff. And I'm trying to make the distinction so that you know when you're asking the wrong questions, or every question that you ask is like a bullet. And it should be directed, and it's not like you've got 1,000 of them. You've got like, because you really probably only have, if you're getting good answers in an interview, you probably only got a dozen questions that you're going to be able to get in. So I wouldn't waste them on theoretical stuff, but I might use it, like I said, to find out information or segue into the behavioral stuff. I can't think, can anybody think of any other good theoretical ones right now?
If you won $1 million in the lottery tonight, what would you do tomorrow?
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Those are good because they kind of show you where your thinking is at.
It's more of a thought or a belief versus an action, which is behavioral.
Right. And so if we want to get at like what's important to them, what's important to them, there's certain things that connote stability, family, work ethic, that sort of thing. Anything that can be a question that might bubble some of that stuff up. Because you can use anything that they now have told you, you might be able to use as a behavioral question later on. Well, when you were working 3 jobs, how did you So theoretical is not necessarily bad, but you got to know when you're positioning them, and you don't want too much of them. Okay? Behavioral stuff will go into depth on probably in our next deal, because we aren't gonna have time. We'll just kind of graze over it. But it's really getting to specific key competencies and behavior that is on the key competencies that you've identified that's important to this job. And it's tell me about a time when. It's how, when you did this, how did that happen? I mean, most of them lead with like, at your last job, tell me about this. Tell me about the last time you fired somebody. How did you handle the stress? And the more specific that you can be, how did you handle the stress when you were at mission? How did you handle the stress when you, if they told you you were going through a divorce, you could ask that. I probably wouldn't, because I'm more interested in specific job-related stuff. Most of them start with questions like that, because you want them to go back in time and tell you about a specific event. Negative solicitation, anybody know about what that is?
Tell me about the time you fucked up.
Yeah. Yeah, tell me about something that went wrong. True story. I asked Ralph this. Nothing's ever gone wrong in any job he's ever had. When I interviewed him, I was serious. Do you remember that?
Of course.
You're like, nah, I can't think of any.
That being perfect, Ted. You talking about the right place at the right time.
I know. I'm like, fucking
golly.
I'm done.
I remember all the questions.
Well, sure, because you answered positively on every one.
Have you ever made any mistakes? Nope.
So, when you're, one thing that you can do when you're asking these types of questions are make it easy for them to confess. So, let's say you want to know how they are about attendance. You say like, hey, you know, we all get sick from time to time, or we have like stuff going on at home, or we just need a mental health day. So, you know, that happens. About how many of those days do you usually take a year or a quarter?
At least once a month.
That's a lot of me.
How many do I take or do I get approved for?
Yeah, so
She just comes in.
you know, so there's a pre-rationalization for that. Like, you know, hey, you know, it happens here. We have, you know, part of our business is dealing with vehicle accidents, you know, so we understand it's part of the business. You know, how many accidents have you been involved while you were driving at this place and that place? Oh, it's okay to have accidents here. Okay.
It's cultural.
Yeah. This is gonna be a good fit for me. So it always, and this is what I'm talking about, like, there's a bit of manipulation going on there. But the truth is the truth. If the guy doesn't take that many, if he goes like, no, I've only been sick once in the last 3 years, that's great. Or he says like, no, man, I haven't had an accident with a truck in, you know, 10 years, and the last time it was my own. I was drunk in Rocky Point. You got that? Everybody got that? Yeah. Okay. I don't even know what the next slide is. Oh yeah, we're gonna do this. So now that you guys know, pass these around. It'll take 5 minutes to do these. very quietly by yourselves. Tell me, just check whether it's a behavioral, theoretical, or a leading question. All right, let's go through them. It doesn't matter if you don't got them done. We'll just go through them right now. So, the top. What's your idea of the perfect job? Shout it out.
Theoretical.
Theoretical. It's just asking a general question. What machines do you use in your job?
Behavioral.
Behavioral, because it says it's asking something that is factual. That what do you use? You can work in the evening, can't you?
Leading.
Leading. You think everything about linen is awesome, don't you?
Factual.
Leading. How would you go about directing a new subordinate?
Theoretical.
Theoretical, because it's how would you, not how did you or anything like that. What sales training did you receive in that job?
Behavioral.
Behavioral. It's asking for like a real thing. How would you recognize the distribution department?
Theoretical.
Theoretical. How would you handle a disciplinary action?
Theoretical.
Theoretical. How did you spend your time after school?
Behavioral.
Behavioral, because it's asking how did you, so it's not asking for you to make something up or tell me a story. Tell me about what you did in the training program.
Behavioral.
Behavioral. With your background, you don't feel you would have any difficulty working for an organization like this.
Leading.
Leading. Tell me how you would change things if you were the manager.
Theoretical.
Theoretical. Most bullshit question of all time. You discipline your employees directly, don't you?
Leading.
Leading. Tell me about the most difficult sale you ever made. Behavioral, because it's something that happened. Did you have any problems with the hours required for this job?
Leading.
That is leading. Give me an example of one of your preventive maintenance projects. Behavioral. Describe your sales approach to the most resistant customer you've ever had.
Behavioral.
Behavioral. Evening work wouldn't be a problem for you, would it?
Leading.
Leading. I guess that's the point where that's the point in the sale where you tried the trial close.
Leading.
That's leading. How did your incentive pay program work?
Behavioral.
Behavioral. Tell me how you organize the paper flow process. Behavioral. Give me an example of when you handled an irate customer. Behavioral. What conversation style would you use talking to a pushy salesperson?
Theoretical.
Theoretical. What would you use? So again, we're saying like, hey, hypothetically, if something was to happen, what would you do? You take the progress reports to your supervisor, don't you?
Leading.
Leading. What was it about your presentation style that was different from others?
Behavioral.
Behavioral. How many calls do you usually make on a potential customer before you give up?
Behavioral.
Theoretical.
Theoretical.
And do you usually make? That's kind of a trick one, but you know.
If you're talking to a guy applying for a sales job that had a sales territory, that is behavioral. I think.
No, a guy should say like, he should tell me, I think, I call on a place 5 times a year. And if I don't get anything on the 5th time, I put it in the file and I go back there 12 months from now. That'd be the right answer.
I've never met that sales guy.
I know. Well, they deal in the world of theory most of the time. What management courses have you taken?
Behavioral.
Behavioral. Sales is really exciting, isn't it? What did you find the most exciting?
Leading.
That is leading and kind of theoretical because it's asking you to kind of tell me what you think is the most exciting. So it's kind of both. You were operating on your own, weren't you?
Leading.
Leading. I suppose you were heartily congratulated for your long-range planning report. Leading. Right. Good. Okay. I think you guys got that down. Okay. This took me longer than I thought, but we almost made it. But that's a good place to stop, I think. Actually, what we're going to do next time is we're going to talk about the behavioral questioning technique that we call SARAS, which is an acronym for Situation, Action, Result, and Assessment. So we'll talk about how we can take some of those key competencies, create questions, solicit real behaviors from, and we'll do a couple of mock plays, and then you guys will pair up and you'll do some stuff on your own. I'll post some homework, but it probably won't be too extensive. I don't even know what it might be exactly yet, but I'll post some of that. We'll do the same thing. We'll kind of go through that before we get into it. Okay?
Cool.
All right, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.